Shabbat Shalom. This was a big week if you are an assassination buff. So Fuad Shakir, who was a leader in the Hezbollah movement, was taken out in the outskirts of Beirut earlier this week, and Israel acknowledged having killed him in retaliation for a missile attack by the Hezbollah army that killed 12 Israeli Druze children on a soccer field in the Golan. This was not a good guy. The United States had a $5 million bounty out on him because he was one of the organizers of an attack that killed 241 Marines. So I just hope that someone is actually going to get that reward. Just a few hours later, the media reported the assassination in an incredibly well-planned and targeted attack of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of the Hamas movement in Tehran. And while no one has claimed responsibility, I'm going to assume that it was not Switzerland or Alabama. And it is particularly impressive that this happened in Tehran when he was present for the inauguration of the Iranian president, whose predecessor was predeceased, passed away in an unexplained helicopter accident. There's no weeping for either of these people. So Haniyeh was one of the 800 wealthiest people in the world. He was worth about $4 billion. This was not arranged. This did not happen from driving Uber. He did not sell the most Girl Scout cookies in the Middle East. This was money that was looted for aid meant for his people. This was from kickbacks from political appointees. This was from rent on real estate that he appropriated. And he lived in a suite in a luxury hotel in Qatar. And although the media will tell you that he was part of the moderate wing of Hamas, that he himself never held a gun, he was certainly the guy in charge of the people who did. Now, by the way, there's lots of other folks. So 5 friends of Yahya Sinwar were taken out this week in a tunnel, and Sinwar himself, who was the most direct planner of October 7th, is still in hiding somewhere under Gaza, surrounded by hostages who are his human shields. And yet the world debates, was this a good idea? Well, to be fair, just because something is right does not always mean that it is beneficial. But I will take a moment and look to our Jewish tradition and the wisdom of our tradition and see what it might offer. This week, Jews around the world have been reading the final chapters of the book of Numbers. We've been reading Parashat Mattot-Massei, which includes the very last battle the Israelites fight before they actually enter the land. And they are told to take vengeance against the Midianites for their attempt to lead Israel astray through idolatry. And even though the Israelites have a standing army of 600,000, this is to be a targeted attack there. It's to select only 12,000, 1,000 for each tribe. This is a symbolic blow, not mass warfare. And they are supposed to go and kill the Midianites, and in particular their kings and leaders. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar. Now, this story is a challenging one for modern readers because it's one of a handful of times in the Bible. Normally, the Israelites are told to obey laws of war and to respect surrender and to respect non-combatants, but this is one of the few times where they are told not to do that and to attack without mercy. As a side note, though, when the soldiers come back, Moses calls them to task. Moses says, "You didn't follow the instructions," which to this day is a hallmark of Judaism and how Israel carries itself. There are Israeli soldiers who may do the wrong thing, but unlike almost every other country in the world, Israel is willing to shine a light and say, you know what? You shouldn't have done what you did. You don't do this in our name. We have ways that we fight, and if you don't follow them, there are consequences, and we are honest about what we do. So this story, in addition to the kings of Midian, there is, if you will, if you're a fan of Deadpool and Wolverine, this is a really deep-cut cameo, because in addition to slaying the people you would expect, the kings of Midian, Evi, Rechem, Tzur, Hur, and Reva, they also kill Balaam ben Beor, Balaam. So you may remember from 2 weeks ago, Balaam was a prophet for hire brought from Mesopotamia to curse the Jewish people, but God said to bless them. And in fact, perhaps against his will, he offers blessings. And so, in fact, the prayer that we say when we enter the synagogue, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how good are your tents, are Jacob, are words of Balaam, who was brought to Israel, who was brought to the desert to curse us. And a friend of mine asked, this man who offered these sublime words of praise for the Jewish people, why would you kill him? And I suppose the answer is, if he was so good, what was he doing hanging out with the Midianites? Because the last time we heard the end of his story, we hear that he went home. He went back to his homeland far away. And so how did he manage to get where he could be killed with the Midianites? And the answer, the rabbis explain, is that after he blessed the people, he actually came up. The next thing that happens is the Moabites and the Midianites come up with a plan. They will lead the Israelites astray by seducing them into idolatry. And according to the sages, Balaam, after he went home, came up with this plan and came back. And in fact, he was present because he helped them implement this plan. He said, God would not let me curse the people because they are righteous. If I can seduce the people, if I can trick the people into doing the wrong thing, then I have the ability to offer words that will harm them. And so therefore, if you will, the Israelites come back and take out the people who planned the attacks against them, not only physical, but spiritual. That not only those who sought to harm with swords, but those who sought to harm with words. And so here we are today, a week after Israel has targeted attacks against those who caused harm. And so pundits will debate, was this a good idea? Was this a bad idea? So one of my friends said, he was the chief negotiator for Hamas. You're just trying to hold up a deal. Well, if there was a desire to have a deal, why are we still sitting here 302 days later? And on the flip side, the people in the Hamasniks, the Hamas leaders who are living in Qatar, in the lap of luxury, really have no stake in the results of these negotiations. Either way, they are still sitting in luxury suites, skimming the top off whatever aid is meant to help their people, while their people serve as human shields. So perhaps one of the things that has been accomplished is that in this game of Middle Eastern let's make a deal, what is behind door number 3 may actually be an explosive. And perhaps it is an incentive, if you want to keep living high on the hog, if you'll pardon, then perhaps you had best make a deal because you could be next. But what about the aftermath? What about the results? So immediately after these attacks, Iran threatened harsh retaliation. Now, it is hard to make predictions, especially about the future, as Yogi Berra used to say. Most American airlines, I think all now, have stopped flights to Israel. Israelis are rightfully nervous. There are some airlines that are still flying, notably Emirates. So the question is, was this an escalation? Well, I remind you that it's not like Israelis were not killed last weekend by Iran and its proxies. I'm kind of reminded there is a couple that is taken captive by some rebel group in the jungle, and they are about to be assassinated, and the leader of the group comes and says, "Do you have any last words, pigs, before we kill you?" And one of them spits in his face. The other says, "Shh, you're antagonizing them." You know, a few months ago in April, we were fortunate, we were blessed. On April 13th, Iran and its proxies fired 300 missiles against Israel, and there was only one person killed. In the Torah portion we read this week, after this war with the Midianites, we are told that of those 12,000 who went to war, 12,000 came back. The leader said to Moses, "We made a check, and not one of us is missing." It would be presumptuous to hope and to pray that the same happens with this latest round that everyone knows is going to come. But to know what is going to happen next, we leave the realm of punditry and enter the realm of prophecy. So we as Jews are entering the time, we are in the midst of a time of 3 weeks of great concern. They remember the anniversary, the season on which our enemies besieged Jerusalem. Israel was surrounded on all sides, and on Tisha B'Av, the destruction came. Tisha B'Av is observed August 12th and 13th, and those in the know think that that is the date that Iran will choose to launch its attack, knowing that this is a day of bad luck, that this is a day of mourning. They are going to try to capitalize on that. And in fact, if we read the Haftorahs for this season, last week, this week, next week, they speak of attacks coming from the north. They speak of the dangers from the south. They speak of the siege, the danger that is coming. But on the other hand, there are also the prophecies of Balaam. So Balaam, the guy who got assassinated by the Israelites in our portion this week, he also has things to say. He says, "Darach kochav meYaakov, a star will come forth from Jacob, a shining light will come up, perhaps like an iron dome rocket. A scepter comes forth from Israel. It smashes the brow of Moab, the foundation of all the children of Seth. Ships from Kittim, the people of Mesopotamia and beyond." And so we have prophecies of dire gloom, and we have prophecies of hope and salvation. I am not a prophet. It's hard enough to predict when this sermon is going to be over. I would suggest to you that this is a time of incredible danger, of concern, and well-justified anxiety. But I would suggest to you that also if you are fighting a war, you have to fight the war. And I would suggest to you that our tradition gives us cause to have concern, to pray. Our tradition also gives us cause for hope, also gives us cause for resolve, because I don't know if the words of Jeremiah or the words of Balaam are more accurate for the weeks ahead. I can only hope that Balaam's dying words are indeed a blessing to all of us. Shabbat Shalom.